On today's Newsmakers, horror in Nigeria, miracles, and Lee Strobel. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we start with a conversation with Christy Beam. Her real-life miracle story is told in the book and film Miracles from Heaven, and today she joins us with an update on her family's life. Let's welcome Christy to the show. Christy, it has been far too long since we've connected, and I'm so excited to get to reconnect with you. For those who don't know, you are the author, and also your family is the subject of the book and the film Miracles from Heaven. Let's get into the story, because as I mentioned, Annabelle suffered greatly. Talk about her health battles, give people sort of a baseline, help them understand what it was before the miracle that she was grappling with.
So Annabelle had something called pseudo-obstruction motility disorder, but she also had something called antral hypomotility disorder. And that just meant that the top and the bottom, both of the stomach didn't work. It didn't have the peristalsis to move food through and out. So she was, her system just didn't move. It was dormant, for lack of a better description. She was on flagyl antibiotics all the time because everything was just literally dormant, stuck there, and it would just get sick and gross. And so she was on 10 medications given about 4 to 6 hours throughout the day, every day. And it was confirmed that she had these two disorders by not only a head guy from the pediatric gastroenterology department in Dallas Children's Hospital, but also from the guru of pediatric gastroenterology in Boston, Dr. Samuel Nurko, and they proved it through manometry testing.
An event happened in 2011 that changed everything, a very traumatic and shocking event in the moments for you guys that involved your daughter. Take us through what happened with this tree that she ended up trapped in for hours.
Yes. We had actually just returned from Boston, one of Annabelle's last visits to Boston when she was very ill. They had to keep her overnight, well, actually for several days, because she was obstructed again. And she's laying on the couch like she always was, in the fetal position with her little heating pad, watching her cartoons. And then all of a sudden she came in and she said, "Mommy, I think I'm going to try to go outside and climb trees with Abby and Adeline." And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yeah, I want to try. And if I can't handle it, I'll come back." Well, unbeknownst to me, Abby, the firstborn, who could be quite convincing, had been working on Anna and had been trying very hard to get her up off that couch that day because she desperately needed it. And so Anna did. And they went to a grove of trees that we have, and there's something about a bird's nest, and Abby was enticing Anna to climb up and come see the bird's nest with the eggs and the mamas. And anyway, so monstrous tree. It is about 30 feet in the air that they began to climb. And they sat up there, and then the branch began to break. And Abby, in her quick thinking and just brilliant, she said, "Anna, there's that little nook inside that tree. Back your weight off the branch and go in that little nook, and then I'll come down below you and help you get down." It was so smart because Anna was so weak and so fragile. But it wasn't a nook that Anna backed into or went into. It was a hole, and it was a hollowed out cottonwood tree. And she fell 30 feet and remembers hitting her head 3 times on the way down and landed at the base of the hollowed out cottonwood tree on her skull.
Wow.
Yes.
She hits her head. She's on the ground there. What does she believe happened to her? Because it's pretty incredible.
So Annabelle said that she just plainly said to me the next day, "You know, Mommy, I went to heaven when I was in that tree. Just as plain as, can I have a glass of water?" Just like that's that. And so she told me that She sat on Jesus' lap and she said, I want to stay with you. And he said, I know you do, but I have plans for you on earth that you cannot fulfill in heaven. But when the firefighters get you out, Annabelle, there will be nothing wrong with you.
So he told her she would be healed.
He absolutely did. He absolutely did.
How many hours? Was it 5 hours that she was in the tree?
From the time that Abby said she went in the nook to the time they got her out, it was 5 hours. But I think firefighters said, I think from their arrival to their departure, it was more like 3.
So she was told by Jesus, you're going to be healed when you're out of this. She had all these horrific medical conditions coming into this. What happened immediately after to her conditions?
So this baby was in that tree for whether it was 3 hours or 5 hours, but a very long time. Remember, she's being dosed every 4 hours to 6 hours throughout the day. By the time we get her life flighted out of the tree, she gets to cook children's. They begin to do one test after another. She's not home until like, I don't know. No, we didn't go home. She spent the night. Then they start to give her medicine in the hospital. So it's been like 10 hours since her last dosing. That's very important. Well, one test came back after another, nothing wrong with her. She had scrapes, scratches, bruises. She was wet and muddy, not a bug bite, nothing. And they said, we cannot find anything wrong with her. So as the days go on, in the ER, I literally began to see her tummy, it was always so distended. And I'm thinking it's because she hasn't eaten. I don't know, but it starts to go down. It's not getting bigger, which it should be. But then the next day when she tells me about her heaven experience, I said, well, I think back and I'm like, Mom, she tells me, and I said, well, Anna, God is so good. He was right. There was nothing did happen to you from the fall. You are okay. There is nothing wrong with you. And she just kind of looked at me like, you don't get it. Anna's the sweetest little soul. So she'd never say anything ugly, but she was just kind of like, you don't get it. And she walked off. I told Kevin's mom right after that, because we saw them. And Kevin's mom is such an amazing, godly woman. She looked me straight in the face and said, Christy, she is healed. God has healed her.
I love that. And that is a great place for us to close today. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
What a powerful conversation. Now, if you're looking for more miracle journeys like that one, you can stream our new documentary, Investigating the Supernatural Miracles. You can find it over at cbn.com/supernatural. We'll be right back with more Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, Joel Veldkamp, head of international communications at Christian Solidarity International, joins us to talk about the horrific persecution taking place against Christians in Nigeria. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers. Joel Veldkamp, appreciate you joining me. There's a lot to break down right now in Nigeria. We've been talking quite a bit about persecution in Nigeria, how horrific it has become, especially over the past couple of years. But right now we're dealing with a heartbreaking and dire situation. Tell us what just unfolded there.
And what just unfolded there is the worst attacks we've seen in Nigeria in almost a year and a half. My coworker Franco got to the city of Jos in central Nigeria on Saturday, on April 12th. Every night since then, there have been attacks on Christian villages in that area. So far, about 126 people have been killed, we think, and over 7,000 people have been driven from their homes. So it's an extremely serious attack, one of the biggest that we've seen in this region for a long time, and it's coming in Holy Week, right? The worst massacre was on Palm Sunday, actually. 56 people were killed in their village by Fulani Islamic jihadists.
So we'll get into some of the ins and outs of what has led to this, but you have a contact on the ground, as you mentioned, and this is really important. A lot of times when it comes to these stories, you'll hear critics who say, well, we don't really know. We're not on the ground. We're relying on somebody telling us. It can be a game of telephone sometimes in these more difficult countries. But you guys at CSI, you often do have people on the ground. take us through, and I know some of these details are difficult, so this is a warning for people as we talk about this, that these are horrific, difficult scenarios. What is your contact on the ground specifically seeing when it comes to injuries, when it comes to the effect? I want people to understand these are not just numbers. These are real people. So talk us through some of that.
Yeah, on Tuesday, my coworker Franco was able to visit the hospital in Jos and meet with some of the survivors of the massacre. And he said most of the people who are in there have wounds from machetes. So the attackers are actually using machetes to kill and to hurt people. He met a 7-year-old boy named Stephen, whose entire family was killed. His father was shot and killed. His mother had both of her arms cut off with machetes, and then she died, we believe. His 2 other siblings were both hit with machetes, and they were killed. Stephen was also hit in the neck with a machete, and they thought he was dead, so they left. And then sometime later, one of his relatives came to their house looking for the family, and they found just him and brought him to the hospital. And even in the hospital several days later, he was still screaming and vomiting from the pain of his wounds. We also met a
7-year-old child, and this was a Christian family attacked in the midst of this.
Yeah.
You have to imagine what it is like to be a 7-year-old, to lose your entire family to this horrific attack, to survive going through this. I want people to understand what is happening to Christians around the world. Particularly, we're talking about Nigeria today. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were going to say something else, so I'll let you take it from there. But I want to emphasize how horrific this is.
Sure. Yeah, just another story that another person we met at the hospital is a woman named Naomi, who has 5 children, and their father and her husband was shot in front of them by Fulani jihadists on motorbikes. They just drove up, attacked the house, and shot their father. So these are some of the stories that we've heard firsthand on the ground in Nigeria this week.
So the Fulani jihadists, one of the things about Nigeria, and we've talked about this before, but I think this is still a very new topic for many people. You have a country, Nigeria, where almost half of the population is Christian. And so a lot of people would say, well, how is it possible that you would have a situation like this unfolding in a country like that? And I know that's a big question, but let's address that. And let's address what is motivating these Fulani, terrorists to do what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah, even though Nigeria is about half Muslim and half Christian, the ruling military class of Nigeria has always been Muslims from the Fulani ethnic group. And that goes back to the British colonial period, where the British made the choice to use the Fulani to rule over the rest of Nigeria, kind of as their middlemen. And when the British left, that structure stayed in place. What's happening now is we have this huge region of Nigeria called the Middle Belt, that's very fertile, that's populated by hundreds of different ethnic groups, almost all of whom are Christian and who are farmers. And we're seeing, for the past 6 years at least, systematic attacks on their villages by Fulani militias, who then, after they've killed the people and driven the people out, take their land and settle on their land. So we're seeing a slow process of taking a region that used to be Christian and turning it into a Muslim region. For the militias themselves, they get land, they get property, they get money perhaps. But for the Nigerian government, or at least for people in the Nigerian government, this is very convenient, because this means that a region where there used to be Christian opposition to their rule will now be cleansed, and they can control the whole country much more easily.
Final question for you. Where can people go? They're hearing about this need. They're hearing what you guys are doing. Where can they go to help CSI in this effort?
Yeah, we would be so honored if people would go to www.csi-usa.org. And there you can give, if you feel so led, to our relief efforts in Nigeria. You can also sign up for our email list. We'll keep you updated about things that you can pray for. And we really do believe prayer is essential to our work. It's essential to our connection to the persecuted church. So regularly we send out email blasts with a list of things that you can be in prayer for in your daily prayer life. And we'd be so blessed if you want to support us that way.
Well, thank you so much. As always, appreciate you taking the time, breaking this all down for us.
Thank you, Billy.
For more information on CSI's work and to see what is happening in Nigeria, you can go to csi-usa.org. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, actress Jen Lilly and I are sitting down with author Lee Strobel. We're talking about the evidence that he has found for the supernatural. Let's welcome Lee to Newsmakers. Lee, you have explored a lot of different cases, the case for Christ, the case for miracles, and now you're going even deeper with your new book, Seeing the Supernatural, Investigating Angels, Demons, Mystical Dreams, Near-Death Encounters, and Other Mysteries of the Unseen World. What was it that made you want to dive in on all these topics?
Well, when I found out that 8 out of 10 Americans do believe in a realm beyond that which we can see and touch, it told me that this is a bridge where we can connect with people who are maybe far from God and yet have an interest in the supernatural, and maybe an entryway for them to really learn about what the Bible does teach about the world beyond our physical realm. And so being an evangelist, that was always my desire. But I found that a lot of Christians who believe, because the Bible tells them that there is a realm beyond what we can see and touch, they still are a little hesitant. You know, you start talking about angels and demons and things like that, and they go, I'm not so sure about all that. So for me personally, it was a real adventure to spend a couple of years really delving into this topic. And being someone who's trained in journalism and law, of course, I was particularly attuned to those cases where I had corroboration, and I could see that there is corroboration that what the Bible is telling us about the supernatural is true.
Yeah, how did you feel about the evidence? Obviously, you've been a believer for a long time, but the evidence going into this, what was your take on it with all these different topics?
Yeah, I believed in it, of course, because the Bible teaches it. But when you begin hearing documented cases, for instance, of miracles published in peer-reviewed medical journals, and when you see thousands, literally tens of thousands of cases of deathbed visions where people get a glimpse of the world to come, as Stephen did in Acts chapter 7, and you begin to see documented cases of near-death experiences where people see or hear things that would have been impossible for them to see or hear if they hadn't had an authentic out-of-body experience after their clinical death. You begin to see that, and it just reinforces what Scripture tells us about the supernatural realm. And I think that's one of the byproducts of really exploring this kind of a topic for Christians.
One thing that I'm really curious about is in the interviews that you had with the people who have had near-death experiences, you know, how consistent was that with the Bible? And regardless of their faith background, that's always interesting to me, that it seems that people who maybe were, you know, raised Buddhist or Muslim or, you know, a different faith background have encounters that line up biblically with the biblical narrative of what heaven is. So I really want to hear about that, if you don't mind speaking to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. What my friend John Burke and I go way back. We were pastors together, 25 years ago or more at a church in Chicago. And he, of course, as a Christian pastor, studied 1,000 near-death experiences. Yes. And he made an important discovery. And the discovery was, if you strip away not how people interpret what happens in a near-death experience, take that away, because people see it through their different worldviews.
Absolutely.
So look at what actually takes place during a near-death experience, the experiences that they have. Those are consistent with biblical teaching. And that was kind of a breakthrough discovery. And the near-death experiences, what I love about many of those is how corroborated they are. For instance, there was a woman who was dying in England after an abortion, and they took her to the emergency room, and she's clinically dead. And yet she says later, I was conscious the whole time. And her spirit had separated from her body and floated toward the ceiling, and she was looking down at the resuscitation efforts. And when she was ultimately revived, she said, oh, by the way, on the ceiling fan here in the emergency room, on the upper part of the blade of one of them is a red sticker.
Oh, my gosh.
She couldn't have seen it. Nobody could see it from the room because it's on the upper part of the blade of the ceiling. So they got a ladder and they went up, and sure enough, there's the red sticker that she only could have seen from her perspective of her spirit floating near the ceiling of the emergency room. That's just one example of the kind of confirmation or corroboration we have that people really do have a moment where their soul separates from their body and they often see things or hear things. There's 21 cases. There was a case study of 21 cases of people who were blind, either from birth or shortly thereafter, who had a near-death experience. And during that near-death experience, they could see, or they had vision-like experiences for the first time. There's a woman named Vicky Umapek, 26 years old, blind virtually since birth, had never really seen anything. And she's in a car accident. She's killed. But she says, I was conscious the whole time. And she describes how she saw the resuscitation efforts, and she saw birds, and she saw flowers and trees for the first time. And then when she was ultimately revived, her vision disappeared. And as the doctor said, this is medically impossible, but it happened. And but the other thing I discovered, and one of the focuses of the book, is yes, we have these near-death experiences, and John Burt's written about those, and I've written about those in these books and others. You dig down into many of these stories, and you find substance, and you find people with eyewitnesses who have no motive to deceive. You have medical records and so forth. And so I think it's fascinating. I have an interview in my book, Seeing the Supernatural, with Craig Keener, who, of course, has documented, countless numbers of miracles now in his books.
Lee, we're going to have you back again, because I feel like we scratched like a little surface of, there's a lot more to talk about, but thank you so much for your time today.
Great to hang out with you guys. Appreciate you. That's what we Texans say, by the way. I appreciate you.
That's right. That's right.
I love it. We appreciate you. It was so awesome to meet you. I cannot wait to read your book.
Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
What a powerful word from Lee Strobel. You can hear more of that conversation on my new Into the Supernatural podcast. And please be sure to head on over to cbn.com/supernatural to watch Investigating the Supernatural Miracles. And if you have a miracle story of your own, we want you to share it. So you can head over to my website, billyhallowell.com, and share it with me. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you can watch the full interviews that you saw on today's episode. As for this show, we'll see you back here again next week.